Hey,
Hello, we did it.
we got it finally. You were having some trouble this morning. Enemy's attacking you, man.
I'm telling you, they're trying to prevent this, but I rebuked it five
I,
times,
I
man.
saw you. I saw you. And it worked, obviously.
So
How-
I want to apologize to you. I didn't get to apologize to you, verbally, but I messed up the time last time, so
oh,
it's totally my fault. So
don't
thank
worry
you
about it.
for allowing me to reschedule.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes that happens. We get time zones and everything else. We get confused sometimes.
That's right. That's exactly what happened. But I thank you, and I've gotten so much feedback already. Everybody's excited about this. This last time. They're like, "Where's the live? Where's the live?" I was like, "Oh, I messed up," you know. But I look forward to this conversation. I look
You
forward to
bet.
sharing this because this is something I'm very passionate about. You're passionate about it, and so first off, I just like you to introduce yourself. Like I want you to do it. I was gonna do it, but I was like,
Sure.
hey, you're the man of the hour.
Well, I'm Kim Kimberling. I'm married. Nancy and I've been married 50 years now. We've got two adult kids. We've got five grandkids. I lead Awesome Marriage, which is basically online social media type ministry where we try to reach people with God's plan for marriage all over the world. And God has blessed that, and we have done that and continue to do that and work on that. It's probably it's a never-ending goal and challenge, but we keep after it every day. I also am a counselor. We have a counseling center in Oklahoma City, and so I spend some time in the counseling center. I spend time with Awesome Marriage and writing. I have a couple of books out, and I'm working on another one now, and so I'm staying pretty busy most of the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. What's up, BB or Babette? Y'all names be confusing me, so forgive me if I get it wrong. But just to recap, in case you didn't hear that, he's been married 50 years. He's a marriage counselor of over 40 years, and he has a ministry that he does called Awesome Marriage, where he reaches people all across the world, teaching them God's plan for their marriage. That is incredible. For those of you who've been following me, you're probably going to remember what I'm about to say. For those of you who haven't followed me, this would be something new that you're learning about me. But since I was young, I lost all my family members at a young age, right? All my immediate family members. So in other words, I had no blood relatives by the age 13. So I say that to say this, that made me really, really care about relationships. So trying to understand relationships, what I really focused on was trying to understand marriages because, I need to have six babies to repopulate the earth. So I was looking for my wife. So I would always, in one way, shape, or form, do what I'm doing now with Dr. Kimberly. I would interview older people who's been married 20, 30 years, but I have to confess, this is a treat for me, and I hope this is a treat for y'all because this is officially the person that I've met or had the pleasure of talking to that's been married the longest. So I am so excited. You have no idea. One of my quotes that I always say is that the wisest way, I usually ask the question, well, what's the best way out of a minefield? In other words, one wrong step, boom, you're dead. Behind someone holding a map. So Dr. Kimberling has 50 years of marital experiences, regardless of race, regardless of his situation. We all face the same things in marriages in our flesh, and being able
Absolutely.
to learn from his tools and how to get there is something I'm very excited about. And you know what's funny about God's providence, Dr. Kimberling?
What's that?
Today is my parent-in-law's 30-something year anniversary. I want to say 35
That's good.
today.
That's great.
Isn't that interesting, guys? I was
It
like,
is.
oh.
It is. It is. Wow, that's awesome.
So today we're going to be talking about the noetic effects of sins in marriage. You want to introduce that to people? What are the noetic effects of sins? What is sins in marriage? Why does it matter?
Well, I think the fact that when you look at the word noetic, it means that we don't think like we're supposed to. We don't think like God wants us to think so. And so we deny God's truth and we make excuses to remain in our sin. And when we do that, then we're not repenting, then we're not changing. We're just saying, hey, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and you figure it out. Now, we're all sinners. We know that. The key is, do we acknowledge our sin and continue on that path to healing, or do we continue in our path of sin? If we continue in our path of sin, your marriage is never going to be what you want it to be, and most likely it's not going to last very long.
Absolutely. Okay, so if we're all sinners, right? A question someone would ask is, if we're all sinners and we're going to sin anyway, how do we make sure that sin doesn't affect our marriage?
Well, sometimes it does. Obviously, there's things that I do that affect Nancy. I think what we've learned is when we do something that affects each other, we've learned to work it out, to talk about it, to apologize to each other, to repent, and to really sincerely say, if that really hurt you, if that really bothered you, I'm gonna, with God's help, I'm gonna change. I'm not gonna keep doing that, as opposed to someone and say, you just got to accept me like I am, and I'm not gonna change. Well, I believe in marriage we change. That's one of the reasons I think we have marriage, just so we can continue to grow and change. And God uses that to shape us into who He created us to be. Who I am today, I think, is very different than if I had been married to Nancy. God has used her in incredible ways in my life to help me to be to where I am now. And so I don't want to miss that. I don't want to miss out on that and let my sin take me a direction that takes me away from that instead of embracing what God's given me and what's in front of me.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. What's up, man? God's way. I did a live with him
All
a few
right.
days ago, Dr. Kimberling, and he's just starting out, but he's doing great works for the kingdom and for marriages. So
That's awesome.
great guy, studied guy. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We're here with Dr. Kimberling, a marriage counselor of over 40 years, married over 50 years, and all I'm trying to do is give him the mic so we can learn from his experience the best way I can. So now you said something interesting about, how do we, in our sinfulness, every human is sinful. How do we ensure that that doesn't affect our marriage? And you mentioned how, we should be acceptable to change, right?
Yes.
So how do you talk to someone that has the mindset of, well, this is how I am. You got to accept me for who I am.
Well, I usually try to put one thing I think is so important in talking to people in their marriage is having each person take personal responsibility, because most of the time we want to point the finger. Well, if she did this or if he did this or they stopped doing that, change. And so one of the things I try to do with people is help them to see their part in it, to help them see what their responsibility is. And then depending on where the relationship is with God is, trying to help them see that God might have more for them, and help them see what that is doing to themselves and to their marriage, and try to help them get to the point where it makes sense to let God change them. It makes sense. It makes more sense to try to do something different than to keep doing what they're doing. And I think sometimes, honestly, we just get lazy. We don't want to put the effort into change. And anytime we do, marriage, you're either moving forward or you're moving backwards, I think. I don't think you just stay status quo. And so if you're not moving forward, then you're moving backward and you become stuck in this negative pattern that's never going to give you the marriage you want.
I like how you put that, to help them see that what they're doing is not producing a good result. In other words, so, okay, what if I'm not Christian? What if I don't believe in this concept of sin and that we're birthed into sin from Adam? How would you help me see my problems? How would you help me see that sin is causing problems in my marriage?
I try to meet people where they are. I think Jesus did that from, I love the story of the woman at the well that was someone that was looked down on by everybody. And yet Jesus met her where she was. And so I don't use, a lot of times I won't use the word sin. I'll just say, what's causing problems in your marriage? What's keeping you from having the marriage that you want to have? What is your spouse telling you that would make a difference for him or her if that changed or that was in your marriage or that wasn't in your marriage? And try to take it from that point and it's really talking the same way I would if I was using the word sin, because I'm talking about something that caused a problem. I'm just not going to talk to them at this point about how that affects your relationship with God, because they're not there yet. And so I think what Jesus did, he met people where they were, and then hopefully had an opportunity to tell them about himself or to lead them to a relationship with him. And so I think it's the same way. I meet them where they are, help them see, help them where they are. Obviously, I know there's going to be better help if God's in their life, if God's is who they're counting on to help them, but to really help them see that, man, we all do things that hurt our marriage. And if we want our marriage to be better, we got to quit doing those. We got to figure out what's wrong, what's keeping me from doing that, and improve our marriage so that it's what we want it to be. And obviously for us, Felice, is what God wants it to be.
Awesome. God's way is definitely the right way. I often say that a lot. Like people reach out to me through inbox or email or, at speaking engagements and they ask me questions like, what's the best way to improve my marriage? And I was like, well, seek to have a marriage God's way. Now, it seems like such a cliche answer. Seems like such a just, oh, I'm just giving you an answer to make you go away. But I really, truly believe that. And I'm glad that you mentioned that because my mindset has always been, look, the same God who's designed DNA, designed air, designed the planets to rotate so that we can live in, he has a design for our relationships. And he has a design for the most relationship that we can have on earth, which is marriages. So why not seek to follow that design? Like that, it's never made sense to me how people can't understand that. So I'm glad that, I could use you as a way to edify that because like, it's so important to me. I don't, do you really see another way? Like,
I've never seen anything else that works. And that doesn't mean, I think there's probably people that aren't Christians that would say they have a good marriage. I think it's not going to be, I think if God's in your life, there becomes a spiritual depth of that marriage that you can't have unless God's in your life. Yeah, you can have a good physical relationship. You may communicate well. You may have a lot of good things in your marriage, but that piece is not going to be there unless God's in your life. And like you said, God's the expert. I mean, if I've got a problem with my car and nobody knows what to do with it, I'm going to take it to the dealer who made the car because they know the intricacies of that car. Well, why not go to the one who created marriage? He's the one who designed it. He's the one who knows all the ins and outs about it. Plus, he knows everything about me and everything about my wife, about Nancy. And so who better to go to get things fixed than him?
I love how you put that. I'm not going to add nothing to it because that's perfect. So now, of course, as great of husbands we want to be or great as wives that we want to be, we're going to have sin, right? It's a part of us, right? We're going to have that. So can you share a time where you've been, blind to a sin in your marriage that you didn't know was causing a problem? And how did you come to that realization?
I think it was, it probably was talking negatively about Nancy's family. She came out of a dysfunctional family, alcoholic family. And so we would talk about it, but I realized that when I would tell some of those stories in front of friends, that it would hurt her. And finally, I didn't pick up on it for a while because she didn't really say anything because I wouldn't say things that were not true. It was just stuff that she would rather I wouldn't share. And so finally, when she told me that one night after I'd said something that really bothered her, then I was able to say, I'm so sorry. I won't do that again. And I was blind to it. I didn't take the time to realize how does this affect her. And so it did cause a problem. So I think sometimes like that, we're not. And I think that's a good point that if your spouse is doing something that hurts you or bothers you, or you feel a sin against you, tell them, get it on the table so they may really be blind to that. Or if they're not and they're just doing it on purpose, that's a whole nother deal. Maybe it's probably time for some marriage counseling if that's a situation. But we can be blind to things too. So give your spouse the benefit of the doubt, tell them, and then give them an opportunity to respond to that.
I think that's very important. In other words, you're saying have an open line of communication to accept criticism.
Absolutely.
I think our culture today, nowadays, I don't know how, your generation was growing up, but I think nowadays our culture sees it as a weakness if we tell someone something that's bothering us or something that makes us like, what do you think about that?
I don't know exactly what it is. I think it's probably been there. It certainly was there when I was growing up. You're saying you see it now. I think for guys, sometimes our pride gets in the way, or we act like we've got it all together when we don't, but we want to act that way. So I think different things can come into that, but I think it's something that probably we all have to deal with. And I think what we have to do is risk at some point and say something to someone that you're committed the rest of your life to, and they've committed to you, and take that risk and share it and see how it goes. And most likely, if you're doing that in the right way, if I'm telling Nancy, hey, when you share or when you're doing this, it really is hurting me, then I think I've got a good chance she's going to respond in a healthy way and tell me, I'm sorry, I didn't want to do that. I don't want to hurt you, those kind of things. Now, if I'm screaming at her and making her defensive and saying, you do this all the time and you're blah, 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 well, that's probably not going to get us far. So a lot of it's going to be not only sharing your concern, but how you say it, when you say it, do it in a way that's loving and caring and communicating that this will make our marriage better if we can address this.
Absolutely. How you say it is definitely a key ingredient to communication. Yep. Definitely. So now a lot of people may not necessarily lean towards a biblical worldview, right? They may lean towards just psychological terms or sciences. So are there any psychological theories that prevent people from seeing their own sins and just accepting just the great things about themselves?
I think that I do think we get blind to things. I think things that we do to try to get control. I think sometimes things work for us, and because they work, we keep doing them when they really are unhealthy. But in our mind, they have worked for us. Certainly someone that has narcissistic tendencies is going to put himself above everything else. I think people get into things that manipulate, and a lot of times because of maybe how someone grew up or the home they grew up, they really don't see those as how they really might affect somebody, because that was just kind of their life growing up. If you had a parent that was always manipulating you to get you to do what you want, that was kind of your normal. And so sometimes we bring those into a marriage relationship, even though we may not have liked it growing up, but in some ways we saw that it worked, and so we drag it forward into a relationship. So I think manipulation. I think one thing that's kind of a hot topic now that we see a lot is gaslighting, where someone tries to make their spouse, when something goes wrong, they try to make their spouse feel like they were responsible, they caused us to do it, it's all their fault. We do those kind of things, and again, it's trying to come back to get our way or to get control. And those aren't deep psychological terms, but there's things I think that happen that affect a marriage in a negative way.
So narcissism is definitely a word that floats around a lot. And you mentioned the gaslighting. That's actually a term that I recently became acquainted with. For those of you who don't know, it's just, shifting blame, right? You're actually to blame to someone, but somehow you're going to shift it to someone else. So those are two, I guess, psychological aspects of it. Now, real quick, as a side note, for narcissism, nowadays, people use that so loosely. Like, can you give a clear definition or a way someone can identify someone who's actually narcissistic?
Yeah, I think there's a difference. I think we talk a lot of times because someone may have a narcissistic maybe behavior or the way they're acting in a certain situation, which is different than someone that would be diagnosed as a narcissist, which means that you're pretty much everything is about you all the time. You don't really care who gets in your way. You're just, all that bully, whatever, that kind of thing. I think the narcissistic tendencies would be like when I would put myself above Nancy without having empathy for her, not considering her feelings or anything about her. I'm just putting myself here and not really at that time really caring what she thinks about it. So we're going to dinner and I'm bent on having Mexican food, and so I don't even ask her where she wants to go. I just go to a Mexican restaurant because that's what I want, and I don't consider what she wants or doesn't want at all. That would be a narcissistic action at that time. If that's something I did all the time, then maybe I do have a narcissistic personality disorder.
Okay, so in other words, narcissism is not just isolated events that display those traits, right? It's just an overall mindset that's just who you are.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes it real clear, because even I used to struggle to find that thin line. So thanks for clearing that up.
It is, and I think it is thrown a lot around, and I think it's thrown around probably not always accurately. Sometimes people will throw that around. Well, you're just being narcissistic, and I mean that trying to get their way or get control or put somebody down. So it's interesting, some of the terms that get in our vocabulary, that we kind of mix the meanings up, and what it means to one person may be different than what it means to somebody else.
Absolutely. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, So you've been a marriage counselor for over 40 years, all right? And,
yes.
And what we're talking about today is how sin affects our marriages. Now, during the 40 years, if you think about all the people that came in, what do you have any examples of any specific sins that people have had the most problems with, and that sought your counseling services?
Really, one of the things that it seems like almost every situation goes back to selfishness at some level.
Oh,
You know,
I'm writing a blog about that. Okay. Oh my God, I wish I released it.
It just is. It seems like whether it's in our marriage or whatever, it's selfishness. I think it's the problem that humans have. That's what separates us from God, is our selfishness. Well, am I really going to allow God to take over my life, to control me? Do I really trust him with that? Well, what if he asks me to do something I don't want to do? So I get selfish with it. I want to do it my way. And the same thing in marriage. Am I selfish in that? Do I really want things my way all the time because I want to control things for whatever the reason is? And then I limit myself of what God has for us in marriage. And that's two people interacting and growing together. So selfishness, I think there's almost 99% of the time that's going to be the root cause for most of us.
Dr. Kimberly, I love you so much. I have no idea. This is an incredible journey. Now, you probably heard my mantra before, and if people have paid attention to my Instagram or my Facebook or heard me speak, you've always heard the following. It's not about you, it's about you two in marriage, right? And
absolutely.
At the core of that, I think of Mark 10:8, where it says, no longer two, but one flesh. The opposite of that is selfishness, isn't it? Instead of thinking of the two selves that are now in union, you're thinking about the one self, and now this person is going to give you what you want.
Yep.
So it's amazing that you point that out. I've often said that the number one problem in marriage is communication, and the reason that the number one problem in marriage is communication is because of selfishness.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, oh my God, I'm glad that you covered that. Now, here's a controversial question, right?
Okay.
Putting you in the hot seat, Dr. Kimberly. What do you think there are areas where women are more guilty of, generally speaking, and what do you think there are areas that men are more guilty of, generally speaking? If you're thinking about, the hundreds of people that you've seen and the problems that you help them to see in themselves.
I would say for men, well, I could probably list a lot of things on both, but I would say men not serving their wives, because I think that is really as a leader, which I think is our core role as a husband, is Absolutely. To serve. Jesus served. We saw him serve people all the time. And I think when we don't serve our wives, I think there's a void there. I think that it can put up a barrier or a wall between us. It can cause her to be hurt. So sometimes that comes out in anger. And so I think guys just consistently, what's interesting is that we pursue our wives so much before we get them married. They think that we're going to be like this the rest of our lives. And we probably can't be exactly like we were when we were pursuing them, because we're pulling out all the stops in to make sure we get that ring on our finger. But you've got to continue to pursue her. And when you do that, I think you're going to serve her, and that's going to go well. For the women, I think it's not only criticism, but the way criticism is conveyed to their husbands. Guys, we want our wives to be our biggest cheerleader. We want her to be our biggest fan, those kind of things. And so I think sometimes we frustrate our wives and they come on overly critical. And I think that wounds a man's soul. And so when that happens, then I think it kind of can begin to drive some wedges there. Instead of being critical, if Nancy comes to me and say, here's some things that I feel like you're doing that I think that would, or I need you to do for me, or that I think would help us in our marriage. If you do this, can we talk about it? I'm going to be all in. If she just sits there and berates me for 30 minutes and doesn't take a breath, then that's going to push me away from her. And I think sometimes women get so wanting things to be better that they take that step and become overly critical, and they push away and don't get what they're really trying to get from their husband.
Great points. As you mentioned, to add to that, men, we are to serve our wife. We are to submit to our wife. When marriage is said to be, compared to Jesus loving the church, that's how husbands are supposed to love to the wife. That's no easy task. So make sure you choose a woman to be your wife that you're willing to suffer for. If you look at 1 Corinthians, when it talks about love, when it says love is patient, that word patient is translated to long suffering. Right. Now, I'm not saying that love has to be this thing that, oh, yeah, I'm just going to let them do anything and I love them and I care. That's not what I mean by suffering. Right. But what I mean by suffering is that as a parent, your kids are going to do wrong, but you love them, you care for them, you provide them, you guide
Absolutely.
them. You're going to suffer as a parent. So that's the type of attitude. And it is true that we do get to the point of, as men, being complacent. Oh, we got them now. Now we don't dress up as much, or we don't flirt with them as much. I've been guilty of that. Especially being a homebody, I had no reason to dress up. Give me a white beater and some basketball shorts or some joggers.
You're good, man. You're good.
Yeah. So lately I've been trying to do better. I was supposed to get my hair cut yesterday, and then I got it today. My wife still said something about it, but makes you look like an old person. Okay. But as women, I think what you pointed out was definitely important. I think women can be very patient. I think women can be very kind and very supportive.
Absolutely.
The right woman, the right godly woman for the man. But there are times where, a lot of women get the mentality that, if you're really a man, then you can take it. How do you respond to that?
Well, you mean as far as just thinking that criticism?
Right.
I would just say to the ladies that we may act tough on the outside, but most guys are tender on the inside. And if they're acting harsh or have a wall up, it's probably because of something that's happened in their life in the past, some way they've been damaged. And so I think trying to relate on a one-to-one basis, the two become one, the scripture that you said, and realizing that we're in this together. We talk a lot about being a team at Awesome Marriage. And if you look at it as a team, then you put the problems in front of you. And as a team, you try to deal with those problems. Whether it's something I'm upset at Nancy about, she's upset at me about, we're trying to solve together. It works so much better when we're side by side trying to figure it out with God's help than we let that problem come between us. And I think that happens so much in a relationship, in a marriage relationship. We let problems divide us when I really think they can unite us. And when you solve a problem together, it does wonders for your marriage.
Teamwork makes the dream work. Unity, lack of selfishness, partnership. That's what I'm getting from everything you're saying. I think it is important. I think a lot of people see disagreements like a tug of war, right? Where they're on opposite ends.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, you're married, you're one now. So those disagreements should be an opportunity to get better, right? To find some type of closeness in that,
Yeah, and when you're in a tug of war, you have a tendency to not fight fair. You try a tendency to say things, do things that are not going to be healthy for the marriage. It becomes a win-lose situation. And that was how Nancy and I fought a lot in the early years of our marriage. We were both strong-willed, type A. And so what we realized was our marriage is crashing because we've got this win-lose thing. And we have to go and come together and go for things that are going to make us both win and the marriage win and get this win-lose thing out of the way.
That is definitely something that I agree with. For those of you who just tuned in, this is Dr. Kimberling, been married over 50 years. Marriage counselor of over 40 years. You can check out his ministry and his counseling services at Awesome Marriage. Just Google that and I'm sure he'll pop up all over the internet. This man's doing great things and I'm glad to have him here. Today we're talking about how sins affect our marriage and how we can deal with that. Now, we've been married 40 years, Dr. Kimberling. And I just celebrated my 10th year anniversary and I got a long way to go. So I think you covered this earlier with the mindset of, being open to change, but what are some other mindsets that we can have towards self-improvement in our marriage?
Hey, and Felice, in today's culture, 10 is a big number. Congratulations on getting to that number. You're welcome. I think it is. I think I guess Nancy and I both figured out that we've always got to work on improving. That I think that as long as God leaves us here, we change, we grow. And so letting God continue to mold us in who he wants us to be. because Nancy and I've changed over the years. What I needed in her and what she did in me when we were 20 or when she was 19 and we started 18, we started dating is different than what we needed when we had kids when our kids were growing up, or maybe when the kids left, or where we are now. So if you don't change, I think that's where people get in a situation where they think, well, they're just bored or whatever in a marriage, because you're not allowing God to continue to change you. You're not acknowledging your spouse's changes and not seeing that as a positive thing as you grow together. And what a great plan God has is how you can grow from, we got engaged before we were 20, and then to go all through those years and everything, and to continue to see God do changes that helped us get to the next level over and over and over, and to get through the level that we're on. I mean, it's amazing how he will do that. And so I think when people don't do that, somebody gets stuck somewhere, and then the marriage gets stuck. And then it's not good. Bad things can begin to happen.
Now, a question that comes up right now is, and I'm sure people have thought, and I've thought myself at some time or some point or another, is, okay, so what changes should be welcome and what changes shouldn't be welcome? Because some people will reject change, I assume, because it threatens their security, right?
Right. So I think that's a great question, because I don't get the impression that any change is good. It's got to be a change that you feel like you got to be open to letting God change you. And what I've seen is that when we do that in our marriage, God has never done anything in my life that wasn't good for my marriage and for Nancy. He's never done anything in her life that wasn't good for her or our marriage. And so I think it's that whole idea of growth. How do we continue to grow? Okay, we got kids that are 5 and 8 years old. Okay, what do we need? We can't go out every night like we used to before we had kids. We've got to make some adjustments. How do we do that? How do we parent together? How do we raise these kids to love God, to be the children, to train them the way God wants them to go? Well, we got to allow God to change us and to equip us in those areas, and to continue to try to be on the same page with that, so that we raise our kids together. And I think that applies to anything that comes up in marriage. And if you're growing together or seeking that, then I think you have such a good chance of meeting whatever that need is at that time in your marriage. And so if we stayed stuck the way we were when we were 20 and we got married, well, I don't think we would have made it very far. We wouldn't have known how to raise kids. We wouldn't have had to know how to go through hard times together. We wouldn't have done any of those things. So unfortunately, you just can't coast for 50 years in a marriage. You've got to be open to change.
Okay, so in other words, the change that leaves you closer to God is a change you should your heart should be secure in.
Yes, and I think too, what we've done a lot, we'll pray together about something and say, we'll say, okay, God, how do you want us to handle this? What do you want us to learn? How do you, that's a great prayer, is God, what do you want us to learn from this? So I don't think anything's ever wasted, that God can help you grow. And I think we just see God show up. God, he has never stood at our bed and verbally told us something, but he just impresses that on your heart. And when Nancy and I both feel that impressed on our hearts, we know that's from God, because he's not a God of confusion. He's not going to tell Nancy to do one thing and me another. No, there's going to be unity in that.
That is amazing. I love it. So what do you think are the most challenging spouses to talk to? And thanks for joining everyone who's just tuning in. This is Dr. Kimberling of Awesome Marriage Ministries. You can check him out. He has a podcast. He has a counseling service where he helps couples develop God's plan for their marriage, basically. And he's been married over 50 years. He's been a marriage counselor for over 40 years, and I'm truly thankful to be able to pick his brain for a marriage like mine and other marriages. So I thank you again for being on here.
You bet.
Those who are tuning in. So what are the most difficult types of spouses to counsel? And how do you overcome that challenge?
Well, the hardest one is when somebody doesn't want to change. That somebody comes into counseling because everybody's told them to come in, or their spouse has drugged them in, and it's usually the guy getting drugged in, honestly, most of the time. It's not usually the wife getting drugged in. And so at that point, it is a challenge. It's helping. Then I've got to help them see that things could be better, to get back whatever their obstacle is of not wanting to be there, and to help them see the value in change. Now, I can only do so much, and it's up to them and it's up to God. I can't do it for them. The other, I think, is someone that are so entrenched in being right that they're not willing to see the other perspective, their spouse's perspective, or those kind of things. I had a couple, a year or so ago, and she was very much entrenched with that. Well, as we got back to it, as a little girl growing up, she was in the type of religion she was in. She could not be wrong. She could not be wrong. She thought it would disappoint her parents, the church, all kinds of things were tied to that. So she gets into marriage for it to give and take, and she would stand on whatever it was that she felt was right and not even listen to what her husband was trying to say. And so I think when you believe that you're so right that you're not open to listening to your spouse or to God, and that's a tough one too. So I think those two things, not wanting to change and believing you're right, not being open to change.
Hardened heart, huh?
Yeah.
It is. That is tough. Wow, it's like talking to a wall, right?
And it's not, with this young woman, it was just the way, she had some things happen in her life at a young age that really had shaped her in some ways that it took a lot of work to get past that. And so it's not like somebody just sometimes make that choice, I'm going to harden my heart. It's that life circumstances and the age those things happened, that their heart gets hardened over time.
In those situations, do you find yourself having to go back to the past to unravel the problems, or do you just focus on the present and kind of relate problems in the past, causing problems in the present?
Kind of my philosophy is we use the past to understand where we are today. So helping her understand that that's probably where the root is. Okay, now we understand it. Let's go to today. How does that affect your marriage today? And what do you need to do to make your marriage better now that you're aware of that? And that's kind of a simple thing, but sometimes it takes a little more work, or God's certainly doing some healing, maybe healing of some past things and memories and hurts there. But that, to me, it's all about using that to get where you are today, so God can use that in your life today.
That's awesome. Yeah, I believe that you don't truly know something until you can break it down simple, like you just did. So that taught me something. I used to have the philosophy that you have to really unravel the past, so it's not, the root doesn't carry to the present. But I think what you're saying makes more sense. And so I'm gonna start applying that. So now, the final thing that actually two things that I would love for you to do. One thing is just what advice would you give to people who are watching right now who are either, wanting to be married, engaged, or are married, that would give them a roadmap to make it to 50 years of marriage?
Sure. I think for us, looking back, I would say God first, your spouse second, all the time. If I'm putting God first, my life is better, and he's not going to put Nancy anywhere else but second, because that's where he designed her to be. And so I think that just having that as your foundation, and then you do things like you pray together, you read the Bible together, you go to church together, and we kind of learned to look at our marriage as a highway. And so it started when we got married. And along that highway, we've had bumps, but we've learned how to overcome those together. We've had some detours that have taken us off the path for a while, but we've always got back on. There's exits, and thank goodness in our marriage, we've never taken an exit to something like adultery or alcohol, drug abuse, things like that. But our goal is, at the end of our marriage and end of our lives, that we want to have the marriage God designed for us. And so that is what I do today on that highway is going to determine that. If I choose to take a detour and exit, then I'm getting off the highway. I'm getting off my goal. And as long as we keep that goal of an awesome marriage in front of us, then everything I do today should be toward that goal. And anything I do different would be what we started out talking about, would be the sin that I want to repent of and get back on the highway and get along with Nancy, moving toward having our marriage everything God designed it to be.
I love that. I love that metaphor or analogy. In other words, stay the course, right? Like if your goal is to lose weight, and eating a bag of chips and a box of pizza is not aligned with that goal, it's not aligned with that course for you. but going to the gym, being more active, sleeping right, drinking water. Sure, you may have junk food every now and then. Those are the
Yeah.
problems that will happen. But you stay the course, you realign yourself. You have a bad day, the next day you recommit yourself. Is that something like what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the beauty about God, that we have so many different chances. I can blow it today, and I know tomorrow I can start all over again, and tomorrow can be a better day than today was.
Okay, now before I get to the last thing that I want to hear
Okay.
about, which is I never heard your story about, how you knew she was the one. That's a question I get a lot. How do you know she's the one? And how did you get married? How did you meet? Let me
Sure.
address this question that we have here from Manhood
Okay.
God's Way. And that question is, are there situations where counseling doesn't work?
Yes. And I think it goes back to if both people aren't all in, it's not going to work, especially if we're talking about something like an affair, adultery, things like that. For that to heal, the person who went out of the marriage has got to be willing to do whatever it takes to get back in. And the person who was offended has to be willing to trust and forgive and move on. So, but I think where I would see things that it doesn't work is if both people aren't wanting it to work. And I've had that. I've had people that really want out of a marriage and they just come to counseling so they can check it off and tell all their friends, well, we went to counseling and it just didn't work. I mean, I've had situations like that. I think when both people come together, they want their marriage to be better, and that they are willing to put God at first and do whatever God wants them to do, I think it works. I think that can work almost every time.
How many situations can you recall where one spouse really wanted to make it work and the other spouse really wanted to exit, but they were able to mend their marriage?
I've had people that have probably come in, one of them wanting the marriage to end, but through counseling changed their mind in that. And I've had other people that I can think of one couple in particular, and there's probably a lot more, that it was pretty evident a few weeks into it, maybe a few months into it with this person, because it was an affair situation, that he really didn't want to do what it takes to make his marriage work.
Now, one thing that I often say, going back to add another layer of coat to that saying, which goes deeper than most people probably, see it as. But when I say it's not about you, it's about you too. One way it addresses selfishness, right? Another way it addresses the fact that God designed marriage to be about you too.
Yeah,
It's two people
absolutely.
coming together, all right? Eve came from Adam. So that unity, you don't get any closer than that unity that image, portrays, or that scripture talks about. Now, can God bless one person when the other person wants out, or one spouse when the other spouse wants out? Absolutely. But
Sure.
to fulfill what I believe God intended for marriage, it takes two people, godly people, developing a relationship with God, trying to honor God in their marriage, really trying to do what it takes for each other. So that's how I've often looked at that situation.
I totally agree. And all the effort, all the work we talk about is so worth it. It is worth it. You will reap. One of the things that saddens me a lot is when I read that how many young couples get divorced, and that there's more divorces in the first year of marriage than there ever have been. Because I think if Nancy and I had a lot of chances we could have bailed in those early years, first years, other times in marriage. But because we persevered, we're reaping the benefits, and we reaped the benefits. And if we gave up, we would never have what we have now. So it saddens me to think that some of these couples, instead of persevering and working through things and learning how to have a marriage and build a marriage, that they're giving up, and they'll never have, because the grass may look greener. It's usually not. I had a pastor one time, he always used to say the grass is greener where you water it, and it makes a lot of sense.
That is true. I was doing a college course a few semesters ago, and we had to do a lot of research in a topic. It was a podcast course, ironically, and our group chose to talk about relationships, and so we had to actually look at facts from reputable places, or the teacher or the professor wouldn't accept it. And one stat that I well, there were several stats, but one stat that sticks out based on what you said is that 1 in 7 marriages end within the first 7 years. So I was like, wow, that's just incredible. And 1 and 2 marriages, I'm sure you've heard that before, get divorced. I think it's going down now because more people are self-indulged in what they want and what they're getting versus getting married. So,
Yep.
but
Yep.
I think it's interesting that you say that. So, you know what I think of, when you say that about staying the course and making it to the end and it's worth it at the end? I don't know if you played sports growing up or if you've known people who are athletes, but you know how, they got to go to practice. They may have migraines. They may be tired. The coach is riding them. Maybe they're stressed from their girlfriend or boyfriend. The teacher's riding them. Stuff's not good at home, but they're going to practice every day. They're playing in the game. They lose a game. They get better. They come back. And then at the end of the season, they win the championship. And then you're holding the trophy up. And you're like, yes, this was worth it. I never played sports, but I watched a lot of sports movies. So, I assume that's how it went. So that's the idea that I get when you say staying the course. And I can definitely say that's for my marriage. Like, my wife and I had a challenging marriage. Everybody look at us now and they're thinking that we're just faking that it's just this good. It took work.
Yeah.
It took work. My wife and I were separated for 4 years. Not separated in terms of divorce, but, she was in another country while I was in the United States. She was trying to get her citizen papers together, and it took 4 years. So, I think about how challenging that was. Think about how tough that. I only saw her that during that time 3 times physically. We went 18 months twice without seeing each other physically.
Wow.
So I was like, oh my God. During that time, people said, oh, you probably have a side girl. I did not. I know it's hard for this generation to believe that, but I did not have no side chick. Unfortunately, I did, gravitate towards porn that I had to break, if I'm being completely transparent, but I did not have no side chick. But when I look at all the problems and the arguments and the trials that we have, to have what I have now with my wife, I would do it all over again.
Yeah, absolutely.
All over again. So, and I pray that people get that. So I would love to hear how you met your wife, how you knew she was the one, and what made her accept to have you be the man that loves her. Because they really choose us. We don't choose them.
Absolutely. Well, we met on a blind date when we were in college. She was a freshman. I was a junior. It was a blind date. She wasn't what I expected. I had never had a blind date. I really thought went well. And the moment I saw her, I thought, I think I like this girl. But our first date didn't go great. And I didn't know if we'd have a second date or not. But we did a couple of weeks later. And I don't know, we really enjoyed each other, I think. We became best friends. And I think Nancy, when we came closest to divorce, and that was probably year 6, we were talking about that not too long ago. We've been interviewed, and the person said, why did you stay? Well, obviously she stayed because God told her, but she said, I didn't want to lose my best friend. And I think we began developing that relationship in college, and that drew us closer together. We've always communicated pretty well. We've had things we've had to do different, but we've tried to communicate. We've tried to talk. And so it took her longer to realize that she needed to marry me than it took me to realize that I wanted to marry her. So we dated 2 years. We got married. She was still a junior in college, and so that was a big adjustment for us too. She moved to Oklahoma City. She'd grown up in Houston, and we were in school in Fort Worth, Texas. All of our friends were still in school, so we had some big adjustments those early years of marriage, of just the two of us and trying to figure things out. And when we look back at pictures of us at those ages, man, we were really young. But I think we always prayed together, and I think if anything brought us through, it was that fact that we consistently prayed together. We probably prayed together 99% of the nights of our marriage. We just have. And Nancy was the one who initiated that on our honeymoon. And so it's probably the best decision we ever made in our marriage.
It's funny the parallel that we have in our story. My wife and I's first date was by her opinion, it was horrible. So I didn't think there would be a second date. Honestly,
I gotcha.
I thought I was in the friend zone, and that's just what it was. We went to this horrible seafood restaurant, and mind you, this is our first date, and we ordered something. She's eating, and I take one bite of what I'm eating, and I'm like, and then I spit it into a napkin. I scratch my tongue. Like, look, I am who I am wherever I am. That's you just gonna take who I am. You know, that's my. So most guys would be trying to be smooth and, you know, how you doing? Man? I'm over here, and she's laughing, and she tells me something that no man who wants to have a woman as his girlfriend wants to hear. You remind me of my brother. Oh no! So I'm thinking,
not gonna be good. Yeah, that can't be good.
I'm thinking here's another situation where I am in the friend zone, and you know I am the master of friend zone, the emperor, the king of being in the friend zone. I'm thinking, well, here goes another woman that I'm in the friend zone with. But you know, I told her, if you keep hanging out with me, you're gonna start liking me. And you know, and we just fit together. We really became good friends. Like we naturally didn't have as many problems, you know, and as friendship is concerned, like we talked to each other, like money was never an issue. If I had it, it was hers. If she had it, it was mine. You know, if she'd be cooking or doing something like that, I'd be cleaning and doing laundry. And we naturally was husband and wife, like on a friendship level. And I think that platform is what, you know, catapulted everything. So I think it's very similar to what you're saying. It
sounds like absolutely.
All right. But is there any final words that you want to give to the audience? And please make sure to tell them where they can get some of your awesome wisdom from your awesome marriage podcast or services.
I think I guess the message that we try to get out of it, that marriage is God's design. It's the relationship, most important relationship next to our relationship with Christ. And I get some people, God calls not to be married, and I get that. But for those of us He does, it's a great experience. And I think what I'd say to couples: persevere, go through those life experiences together. You know, people sometimes when they tell me they're bored in their marriage, I just think they're not putting everything into it, because I personally don't think you can learn everything you can about somebody else in a lifetime. I still learn things about Nancy, and should say she learns things about me. And so I wanted we want our relationship to be second only to our relationship with Christ. And so that's where our efforts go. And I just encourage people to do that, because God's got something special for you. Don't miss out on it. You know, don't miss out on it.
Absolutely. Where can they get more of your wisdom from?
AwesomeMarriage.com has just about links to everything. We have an email that goes out every day, Monday through Friday. It's one thing you can do for your marriage each day. It's onething.email. You can sign up on that. There's the Awesome Marriage podcast. We have a Better Man podcast where I team with a pastor, Colby Taylor, and we talk about guy stuff. And then we, our podcast, Instagram, all the social media, we're there. And but awesomemarriage.com, there's links to just about everything we do there.
Awesomemarriage.com. Dr. Kimberling, you have been awesome in helping these marriages today. And it means so much to me that you're on here. Not only because you give a lot of people insight to stuff that I've been saying that maybe they'll take from you and not me, and that's fine.
No, I think we have kindred spirits, I'll tell you.
I'm perfectly fine as long as the marriages are fixed. I don't care where the information comes from. But it feels good that you edify some of the stuff that I've been saying. And it's like I get a glimpse of where I can be when I talk to you, or when I hear you. I get a glimpse of where I can be, not only in my education, because, you know, like I've told you in your podcast that I'm in August 14th, I'm starting my marriage and family degree. And not only in my marriage, because I'm like, okay, what do I have to continue to do or get better at to get to 50 years? Because I'm not, my wife just going to have to live with me in the house with someone else if she divorced me, because I'm not going nowhere. That's just what it is, baby. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's my heart. That's my breath. You know, I don't even save her name on my phone. It's saved as my heart, you know, so.
That's cool.
So I thank you for being here.
I love what you're doing. I think God's doing great things. I think the first time you and I talked, we just felt that kindred spirit. Your heart for marriage, I love the way you're doing things, and excited to see how God continues to bless this ministry.
Thank you so much. And everybody, I'm going to be showing this clip, saving this clip on my Instagram Live, so you have something to reference to. Please go watch it. Please tune in to the knowledge that he's dropping, to be able to get in your marriage, what he's gotten in over 50 years. The thing that I want to leave you with is something that he said is that try to follow God's plan for marriage. It's funny to me how people want to, master their money or master their fitnesses, and they go to someone who's created income, or, they go to someone who has a certain type of body, but the ultimate designer of marriage, you're not seeking to understand his word and his way to be able to develop that in your marriage. So I implore you to get closer to God, and let that not be just closer to God in the sense of getting a pep rally once a week at a church, but let that closeness be demonstrated in your relationship and your walking and your growth as a Christian. And that definitely, as Dr. Kimberly says, gives your marriage a depth that you will not even be able to comprehend in words without experiencing it. Check out awesomemarriage.com and you'll find all the great things that he's doing. My name is Felice Mathieu, also known as Married as One. And this has been a tremendous, probably my favorite live, like without a doubt, my favorite live that has to do with improving marriages, because we're talking about a very important thing in marriages, which is the sin in marriages. And that's not a popular topic, Dr. Kimberly. When I wrote my book, the very first few chapters, I say sin. So, maybe that's why it's not read that much. But
it's a book closer, yeah. But it's got to be said because it has to be said.
So, but thank you again, and God bless you. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Bless you too.
Thank you.